Chapter 818, Warning. Klein's gaze moved away from Wilma Gladys and looked to the pastries like carrot cake and cream puffs to the side, as well as the roasted poussin, stewed lamb, seared ribeye, daisy roasted fish, and the other food nearby. He gulped his saliva slightly and forced himself to retract his gaze as he prepared to invite Ma'am Mary for the second dance. As the host, he couldn't skip any of the first 3 dances. Therefore, all he could do was temporarily forget his hunger and the delicacies. And at this moment, Wilma Gladys, whose pregnant state showed, walked to the spot where there was ice cream. She reached out her hand before retracting it. "You want some?" Dr. Aaron hadn't joined the first dance as he stayed by his pregnant wife's side. Wilma Gladys sternly shook her head. "No, I don't, I'm pregnant. It's not good to have ice cream. However, the little fella in my tummy seems to want a little, just a little." Dr. Aaron nodded indiscernibly and said, "Then have some, leave the rest to me." Wilma immediately revealed an irresistible smile. "You spoil him too much." She didn't object to it, as she watched her husband pick up a scoop of ice cream that had been circled with ice. After taking 2 bites, Wilma closed her eyes and suddenly shifted her gaze. She looked at a few ladies who hadn't participated in the first dance. They were chatting about something in hushed tones. They had smiles across their suggestive faces, often covering their mouths and laughing covertly. What interesting matters are they talking about? Wilma's curiosity was instantly piqued, and after informing her husband, Aaron, she walked over. However, the few ladies quickly dispersed, as though they were awaiting the second dance. Wilma was disappointed as she asked the young, beautiful lady who remained standing there, "Do you know what they were discussing about?" "I'm not interested in their topics," Hazel said as she glanced at the pregnant lady beside her. She didn't fault her for being a little impolite, because pregnant ladies often had some privileges. Only then did Wilma notice that Hazel, with her long black-green hair, was holding a cup of champagne. She looked like she had no wish to be invited to a dance. She has a sense of pride that stems from the bottom of her heart. Even when looking at Baronet Madams, she will only maintain the most basic courtesy. This is a delightful character, but the problem is that she's like that to everyone. She's overly cold and aloof. Perhaps she's in the rebellious stage that Emperor Roselle had mentioned before. As a middle school teacher, Wilma couldn't help but make comment inwardly. Then, knowing better, she opened up a distance from Hazel and began looking for the ladies she was familiar with. After completing 3 dances, Klein finally had a brief reprieve to stuff himself with more food and drink some thirst-quenching sweet iced tea. This was a day's specialty that he specially got the kitchen to prepare. Due to the influence of Death Knell, he had drank a little too much. After having a short conversation with Bishop Electra, he had to apologize and take his leave to the washroom. In fact, he could hold back for another 3 more dances. However, he felt that snake of fate Will Ossipton might have wanted to communicate with him, judging from his sudden appearance. Therefore, he found a suitable place without anyone around. Although he is an unborn fetus and came here passively, if he doesn't wish to meet me, he has 100 ways to stop his mother from heading out. In short, it's worth giving it a try. Klein mumbled as he entered the washroom and locked the door. Just as he was in a dilemma to deal with his burgeoning bladder or patiently wait another 2 minutes, his spiritual perception triggered as he looked at the mirror. At some point in time, the mirror had produced a black pram that was covered in shadows that prevented him from seeing any details. The only thing he could discern was that there was a child wrapped in silver silk inside. The child used a clear voice and said, "Your fate deviated a little." "What happened?" Klein tensed up immediately. Will Ossipton in his infant form scoffed and said, "You should ask yourself. All I know is that you likely met an angel." Klein immediately recalled his experiences on the primitive island and had a guess. After contemplating for a few seconds, he asked with a frown, "Can angels see my uniqueness?" "I've met Orange Light, and he said that only a few high-level creatures of the spirit world, as well as deities with certain unique authorities or beyonder who represent fate, can discover this point to a certain extent. Of course, close contact has to be made." In the pram, Will Ossipton sucked at his thumb and laughed. "Probably not, because you aren't dangerous. Besides, apart from you being unique, some items on you or your companion might have a similar uniqueness that can garner the interest of that person. Items on me, my companions. Klein's mind raced as he discovered that he might have been psychologically cued in the past, and along with the fact that he hadn't thought of it, he had missed out something. When exploring the primitive island, he had brought Grossel's travels along. This was a book created by an ancient god, the dragon of imagination, Ankwelt. If that primitive island is related to the Twilight Hermit Order, be it the Angel of the Spectator pathway deep inside the cathedral with a high-sequence ingredient of the Storm pathway, or the opposite, he will likely be interested in the notebook. After all, the leader of the organization is the Angel of Imagination, the son of God, Adam. And it's because of this notebook that I was allowed to take away the Tyrant card, while also preventing me and Mr. Hanged Man from continuing the exploration. Klein had a hunch as he asked, "How should I resolve this?" "There's no need. In the long term, this should be something good, but there might be some trouble midway," Will Ossipton replied with a clear voice. "Furthermore, you are already burdened with so many matters. An additional matter wouldn't matter. I warned you so that you can take note so as to not be struck by trouble." "Makes sense. One stops worrying when there are too many debts. Perhaps it might create opportunities and let my debtors end up fighting." On careful thought, Klein echoed inwardly. He asked instead, "My friend who wishes to obtain a drop of a mythical creature's blood wishes to know exactly what you need." "What do I need?" Will Ossipton scoffed once again. "There's plenty I need. For example, the means to accommodate the die of probability or how to finish off Ouroboros. If it's possible, you can take as many vials of blood as you want. But can it be done? If it's possible, why take the risk to finish off Ouroboros? Wouldn't it be easier to just deal with a weak snake of fate like you?" As Klein lampooned, he shook his head without a doubt. "No." "Then think of something else. I'm not in a rush." Will Ossipton paused and said, "There's a very arrogant lady at the ball tonight. There's something wrong with her. If you have the chance to chat with her, you can lead the topic of conversation towards dreams." "Hazel, dreams." Klein nodded in thought. "Okay." Seeing that Will Ossipton had the intention to leave, he hurriedly said, "That paper crane is about to tear. How should I contact you in the future when I encounter an emergency?" Will Ossipton fell silent for a moment before saying, "Are you hoping that I can fold a paper crane for you in my mother's tummy? Even if I can, you won't be able to get it. If I have any desire to find you, and as long as you live here, I can do so at any time during dreams. If you have any emergency matters, just visit my father directly. After all, don't you have to wait when using the paper crane? All right, as a fetus who hasn't been born, I need to have more sleep. Let's leave anything else to the future." All Klein could do was nod and say, "If there's nothing else from you." Just as Will Ossipton was about to dissipate his body, he suddenly paused for 2 seconds and said, "Another thing." "What is it?" Klein tensed up once again. Will Ossipton dragged out his tone and said, "The ice cream your cook made is too sweet." "Ah." Klein temporarily didn't react to what he was saying until the black pram vanished from the mirror. He then snapped out of his daze and couldn't help but twitch the corners of his lips. After settling the problem with his burgeoning bladder, he washed his hands and came out. He found Richardson and instructed, "Go to the kitchen and get them to lower the sweetness of the ice cream that is subsequently being made." Richardson didn't ask why, and he immediately did as he was told. Only when he was about to enter the kitchen did he recall the problem. Mr. Dwayne Dance hasn't touched the ice cream yet, so how did he know that it's a little too sweet? Towards this problem, Richardson quickly had an answer. He believed that a guest had informed his employer after sampling the ice cream. Although it was a little impolite, it wasn't something rare, especially among familiar friends. They would proactively and kindly inform him so as to prevent the host of the ball from suffering unpleasant critique. At this moment, as the previous dance was still happening, Klein wasn't in a hurry to consider a dance partner. He walked to the long table by the side and seized the opportunity to have some of the delicacies. Just as he selected a piece of dainty roasted fish without many bones, he suddenly saw Wilma Gladys lean over and pick up a cup of sweet iced tea. The lady nodded at the host and smiled. This beverage is nice. I've never had it before. It's sweet iced tea from the South, Klein explained with a smile as he casually glanced at her tummy. He seems to be very obedient. Oh, perhaps it's a she. Wilma smiled. Most of the time, but there might be some stirrings in the middle of the night at times. Middle of the night, at times, don't tell me it's when he's replying to my questions. Klein suddenly broke out into a sweat as he feigned ignorance and cast his attention back onto his plate. As Wilma drank a sip of sweet iced tea, she headed back to her previous conversation. When the new dance began, Klein handed his plate and cup to an attendant beside him and glanced at Hazel. He slowly walked over and bowed with a smile. "Lady, may I have the pleasure of dancing with you?" Hazel fell silent for a few seconds and placed the cup of champagne onto an attendant's tray and replied politely, "It will be my pleasure."